Hello, I am back again, and I am reading from The Princess Royale, and I am on this section of the Princess Royale Charlotte. She was the daughter of King George III and Queen Charlotte. It's actually a very good read. I'm just gonna show you some pictures right now. You can see that is Queen Charlotte. She is the daughter of King George III and Queen Charlotte. So here's a good picture. But I'm going to show you some parts about her life. You can see this. Describe to you what I can see about her life. She was born in 29 September 1766 at Buckingham House to King George III and Queen Charlotte. She had a few older brothers. So when she came along, they were very, very happy to have her. Charlotte was officially designated as the Princess Royale in 1789. So she later married Frederick of Württemberg. She was came from the House of Hanover. Her father was George III and Charlotte Mecklenburg-Strelitz. So I used to live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the county was named Mecklenburg County, which is outside the city of Charlotte, North Carolina. So it was named after Charlotte, at the time, because North Carolina was a colony of Britain. So it's quite interesting to see. But yeah, I mean, she was a loved and beloved, beautiful baby of them, and they were very, very happy to finally have a daughter. So I'm going to read. It takes about 35 minutes to read this, and I am going to read so you can maybe see pictures of her. I don't know which one is the best picture, but if you want to, this right here is her as an infant with Queen Charlotte. And then right here is her portrait. So that's just to give you the visual of Princess Charlotte. And we all know that when William becomes the king, we will have another Princess Royale Charlotte. When William bestows the title, it's not an automatic styling. They usually wait for them to grow and mature into their role and make it a special occasion. When our current Prince Royale, Anne, became styled as Prince Royale, they waited a while, and she was styled in June 1987, and it was a very special occasion, and they bestowed the title on Prince Philip's birthday. So it's a very unique and very nice story, and it helps all of us understand the roles, which there are no definitive roles of Princess Royale, but when you see, like in Princess Mary, who was the Countess of Harewood, and then you see our current Princess Anne and the roles that they have done and how they have supported their brother, you will see, how important and how significant a role it is. So I'm going to go ahead and get started in reading. And you can find this, actually, you can find this same book that I'm reading, this book right here. It can be found on Audible, and it has a wonderful lady with a British accent. She's got a very pleasant voice, and you can listen to her because she's got a very, very pleasant voice, British voice, and it's such a nice, pleasant thing to listen to when you're out walking or when you're, doing your chores or when you're in the grocery store shopping. I mean, just something to listen to pass the time while you're busy waiting or in the car reading. So, The Princess Royale, Charlotte, September 24th, 1786. Going to my gray mare when a servant told me that Her Majesty had been brought to bed in the morning of a Princess Royale. She wrote, Lady Mary Coke, in her diary, with her lively sense of occasion, and by every highway in the kingdom the news spread that after the sequence of 3 healthy sons, the young Queen Charlotte at last had had a daughter. Loyal toasts were drunk and bonfires blazed in celebration. The little princess was the first to be born in the new royal residence of Buckingham House. This was the Queen's house, as it was known, and those admitted to St. James's Palace as usual, to drink the Queen's caudle, especially prided themselves on seeing that first in the quality of female infants as the Princess Royale. Were they mistaken? The king's son and heir, born a mere prince, had been created the Prince of Wales when he was only 5 days old by the letters patent under the Great Seal. And further, Prince of Great Britain, Electoral Prince of Brunswick, Lunenburg, Duke of Cornwall and Rothesay, Lord of the Isles, and Great Steward of Scotland. But the establishment evidently took for granted the precise status of the first girl. The annual register was to record that on 27 October, HRH, the Princess Royale, was christened by the Archbishop of Canterbury. George II's eldest daughter, the Princess Royale Anne, had been gone only 7 years. Her style and title remained fresh in the memory, and so George III's first daughter was given equal rank. It was by habit and repute, one might say, by an instant verdict of public opinion, as well as the king's vigorous pleasure. His Majesty's subjects enjoyed the marzipan of titles. The only style was taken for granted without the slightest disputation, and the caudle drinkers indulgently feasting their eyes on the child without any tiresome legal quibbles in mind. It was a long established custom for both young mothers and convalescents to share their caudle with visitors. This was a hot, recuperative drink of fine oatmeal and crushed biscuits, beaten with egg yolks and mixed with spice and sweetened wine, and the court ceremoniously offered a caudle rather than seem to fail in hospitality. Ladies who had been present knew that the mulled refreshment included the privilege of seeing the baby. 40 guests were admitted to St. James each day between the hours of 12 and 3, and the custom was observed under the birth of the last of Queen Charlotte's 15 children. In the Queen's guard chamber, the lady found a buffet spread with little cakes and the streaming urns and leaded caudle cups. Perhaps for the Princess Royale, the royal caudle set of Chelsea porcelain of fine blue celeste enameled in cupids, or the derby set in fine gold chain work, they were prominent. The royal kitchens prepared 72 quarts of caudle fresh each day. It was more than enough to give every visitor a rosy view of the proceedings. In the small groups, the the viewers were ushered into the drawing room to find the infant princess displayed beyond a gilt railing in a carving and gilded cradle upon a dais beneath a canopy of state. Lined with white satin, the cradle was spread with crimson and gold lace, edged with a sheet of Brussels lace, and nearby sat the nurse, a velvet cushion on her lap to support the baby when she was out of the cradle. These royal shows were highly popular, so much so that one year when there was no new baby, the king incautiously announced that the royal children would hold a levee instead. The outraged nobility found themselves expected to bow or curtsy to three pudgy infants. The 7-year-old Prince of Wales wearing the Order of the Garter, the future Duke of York adorned with the Order of the Bath, and the 3-year-old Princess Royale Charlotte Augusta Matilda. She was seated on a sofa between her younger brothers. The caricaturists included the malignant Gilray. He had a field day, but nothing diminished the king and queen's belief that their family should be seen by the people, highborn or low. As the children grew older, the public was admitted on Thursday to the grounds of Kew Palace, where the boys were sometimes to be seen playing cricket or working in the fields of their modern farm. To this day, showcases at Kew display some of the children's toys and possessions. The Princess Royale's silver rattle and their alphabetical blocks, with Q for quince, one notice rather than queen. Once a week in the summer, the royal family walked across the Richmond Gardens, the youngsters 2 by 2 in precedence, followed by their parents, first with the Prince of Wales and his senior sister. Then the next 2 boys and the 2 younger girls, all paired in crocodile formation, with the youngest children and their nursemaids shepherded by the king and queen. The Prince of Wales reveled in the administration of the crowds. The Princess Royal, as a young girl, hated these promenades, loathed being one of the first to face the curious gaze of the onlookers, and quailed as she met their searching eyes. Princess Royal has excessive sensibility. She has a great sense of injury and a great sense of her own situation. She has much timidity, sympathetically wrote her friend, Mrs. Harcourt. The extreme quickness of her feelings shows in perpetual blushes. Others around the princess thought her shy, even clumsy, despite a good figure, never elegant in exhibition. At the core of her shyness was her rank, the strange special distinction of being Princess Royale. It set her apart. Her own mother spoke of her and addressed her as Princess Royale, and it was never Charlotte. To her brothers and sisters near her own age, she was always Princess Royale, though the younger children called her Royal. It was probably the utmost that baby lips could frame. Her governess, the household, and the doctors addressed her as Princess Royale, as if that were her name. Her nearest sister, Princess Augusta, 2 years her junior, was in clear contrast given the affectionate diminutive of Puss. When her second brother, Frederick, the Duke of York, made his first journey abroad, he sent gifts from Hanover. He added explicit instructions that the first package was for Princess Royale and the other was for Puss. The other 2 little things are for Mary and Sophia. The gift was perhaps a sketchbook of a new kind, for drawing had become a favorite preoccupation. Unlike her predecessor, the Princess Royal Anne, with her ardent admiration of Handel, she heard music almost with pain. Before attending a concert, she once wrote to her younger brother Augustus that she hoped she would stay awake. Incapable of perceiving rhythm, her first ball was an agony of humiliation. When she lost her shoe and had to cling to her gallant elder brother, Her Highness hoped the musician had stopped. Not knowing what to do, wrote the rhymesters. It hardly improved matters that the accident occurred under her mother's reproving eyes. She was always under restraint with the Queen, wrote the observant Mrs. Peppendack years later. Timidity always brought her forward as ill at ease, while out of the Queen's presence she was a different being. From another angle, indeed, Charlotte showed good judgment and a very sweet temper. Fanny Burney noticed how freely she allowed the young children to pull her about, never complaining. As one of the Queen's ladies, Miss Burney had an intimate and perceptive view, but others at court also noticed the princess's sweet and forbearing nature. Pray give me your love, for I wish for your love so much that I think you must give it to me, she once wrote in a delightful letter to her governess, Mrs. Goldworthy. When painting his series of Windsor family portraits, Gainsborough avowed to his artist friend Angelo that the sweetest, the most lovely of that youthful group always appeared to me to be that of the Princess Royale. She was also one of her father's favorites, and he alone called her by her intimate Christian name, which was Matilda, and noted the tender care and affection she showered on her younger sisters. In the Royal Library at Windsor, there were remains of books which he once gave her as a New Year's gift. Tenderly inscribed in the book, "My ever dearest daughter Matilda, governess to her 3 younger sisters." And it was with his eldest daughter that the ailing king chose to go out for a drive on a terrible November day in 1788, when he first seemed to take leave of his senses, giving so many orders to the postilions and climbing in and out of the carriage so often, as Fanny Burney put it, the fear of a greater fever hanging over him became more and more powerful. The king was, in fact, suffering from an inherited family illness, with symptoms far more akin to physical sickness than the insanity feared at the time. 3 weeks later, when the doctors moved him to the seclusion of Kew, he begged that the Princess Royale should accompany him, though this small comfort was refused lest she could be in danger. Telling of this years later, the princess could not restrain her tears. The queen was terrified, and all the records show that it was Royal who proved a tower of strength to the distracted family. In a new year, it seemed that the king might never rule again. Plans for a regency were put in hand, though not without ensuing problems. Clearly, the Prince of Wales and the Queen could help govern the country, but in the event of their illness, who then followed, 5 of George III's other children were then of age, and on examining their merits, the dismaying discovery of a long-standing oversight was made. By a formal legal definition, the eldest daughter had never formally been given the title Princess Royale, and in reality she held no higher form of rank than that of any of her other sisters. The unaccountable error had to be made good as swiftly as possible. Fortunately, the king improved. Early in April, Royale herself organized a gala at Windsor, at which the king made his first public appearance since his illness, and on the 23rd of April the royal family drove in state to St. Paul's for an official Thanksgiving service for his recovery. Precisely 2 months later, on June 22nd, 1789, the title of Princess Royale was conferred officially on Charlotte Augusta Matilda. 3 months later, her 23rd birthday was celebrated with a special distinction. All the glories of a court ball were revived at Windsor. But to the disappointment of the birthday girl, no new and eligible young men were present. Okay. We're on to another section. It's called Part 2. Only 3 years older than the Princess Royale, the Duke of York wrote sympathetically from his army billet that he knew what a dreadful life he must lead. After the king's return to Windsor, the atmosphere became stifling. Although George III was to enjoy good health for the next 12 years, his family never again knew complete peace of mind. The Queen could seldom free herself from the haunting thought that the nightmares, repeat that again. The Queen could seldom free herself from the haunting thought that the nightmare distress of the breakdown might reoccur. I want you all to be happy, she told her children. But there was the instant fear for her husband and the constant worry of her eldest son's wanton extravagances. With the lies and the deceit of his secret marriage to Miss Fitzherbert, anxieties no less deep lay over the alliances of her other sons. And with every fresh family distress, a nervous storm broke around the head of the luckless royal. The princess now acted as her mother's secretary and reader, which usually entailed being the Queen's constant companion. She had little, if any, private time to herself. Princess Royale enjoyed no financial independence, and the Queen scrupulously controlled her wardrobe allowance, a restriction not improving her haphazard dress sense. The wilder the princess became in the permissive Georgian society, the deeper the Queen's determination to protect her daughters. Newspapers were vetoed, save the Queen's express approval, and even the innocuous books of Fanny Burney. The Princess Royale said that it was like living in a closeter, not a kingdom. Coming as it did after a carefree childhood, such restraint led inevitably to a sense of grievance. When the Queen sought to lessen ill effects of banning correspondence between her sons abroad and her daughters at home, the practice developed of chewables, meaning messages which could meet the Queen's restrictive eye, as distinct from more intimate and truthful letters that were secretly carried by intermediaries. These subterfuges, they scarcely improved matters between Queen Charlotte and Princess Royale. More adult than other girls, yet treated more as a child. One day, when the Prince of Wales had called to see his mother and the princess and bantered good-humorously with them both, his sister slipped out afterwards and begged to speak to him for 2 minutes in private. She then told her brother how much obliged she should be if I would never joke with her respecting the smallest trifle in the presence of her mother. George reported the incident to his brother, as I did not know how she suffered for it afterwards, how she was treated. Brother Frederick sympathetically responded, I wish to tell you fairly that nobody pities her situation more than I do, or to see her married sooner. Not surprisingly, the princess was becoming ultra-sensitive. because she had been born near Michaelmas. Her mother had the fond habit of calling her a goose. But the term quickly appeared one of the opprobrium and even insult which became insupportable. In these repressive atmosphere, In such a repressive atmosphere, an unquestionable family convention had grown up that the king should never be approached on family matters, and in particular, he showed a rooted reluctance to discussing his daughter's marriage hopes. The eldest princess was only 15 when Lord Chandos raised the possibility of a state marriage to the Emperor of Austria. But nothing emerged beyond diplomatic talk. Later on, a Prince of Orange inevitably appeared as a suitor, only to encounter the king's invincible hostility to the thought of losing any daughter in a continental alliance. The royal brothers not infrequently made furtive reports to one another on possible bridegrooms. Frederick the Great's grandnephew was mentioned, and the Duke of York dolefully commented, "I cannot think that she can expect to marry the Prince Royal here, because she is now 24 and he is 21. Peter of Oldenburg, he was the heir to the dukedom of the name, and presented himself to the inquiring brothers. He was a widower for 10 years, and he was a father of several children. Hardly eligible as a husband for the Princess Royale of England, although she viewed the prospect radiantly. Her cheek turned to a damask rose whenever his name was mentioned, as her sister Elizabeth reported. If it could be brought about, wrote hopefully, it would be the proper situation. Yet the king fumed and fussed at the opportunity slid by. Not for the first time, the princess fell into such low spirits that the doctors wondered if she had not a touch of her father's ailment, and ceased to talk to the patient with her customary discretion. Convinced that she now has no chance of ever altering her condition, she has fallen into a quiet, desperate state, what is commonly called broken-hearted, noted James Burgess, the physician. Another eminent medico, Sir Lucas Pepsis, bluntly told his colleagues that since he saw no chance of her being able to marry, he feared for her life or her understanding. This was putting it strongly, though Royal saw no alternative to the tepid routine of the terrace walks at Windsor or the sluggish annual visits to Weymouth, where, as she complained in exasperation to the Prince of Wales one wet summer, "If we had not the resources of the playhouse, I don't know what would become of us." Clearly, this was long before royal princesses were ever occupied with their insatiable routines of official duty. However, we read that the Princess Royale accompanied her mother in schemes of benevolence and philanthropy. In one year, the elder sisters took part in a visit to the University of Oxford during a vacation time, going in and out of colleges. Another year, the royal family paid a visit of inspection to Whitebread's brewery. Amid heartfelt cheers, and a West Country tour took them further afield to a naval base in Plymouth and to a ladies' boarding school at Sherborne, where the pupils all loyally wore the inscription, "God Save the King," across their white aprons. One can see the shape of distinct things to come, even if these functions were merely pencil sketches to the glowing royal canvas of the busy future. One is led to the interesting reflection that the endless duties of today's supporting cast of the monarchy may have originated as an antidote to boredom. the Prince of Wales, all too clearly the cause of his elder sister's pale looks and intense depression, the constant restraint, the tiresome and confined life, but what was worse than all is the violence and the caprice of her mother's temper, which, as the hour grows, becomes worse, to which she is obliged to be absolutely a slave. And then, when the Princess Royal was in her 30th year, and her prospects seemed blackest, there came an envoy to the king asking that the hereditary Prince Frederick William of Württemberg might seek his eldest daughter's hand. The unrelenting monarch, he kept the representative waiting for 4 months. The would-be bridegroom was a widower with 3 young children, the brother, indeed, of Peter of Oldenburg's dead wife. In the background lingered an unpleasant rumor that Frederick William's wife had run away with a Russian and was perhaps still alive. The king brooded and he hesitated, and the weeks went by until the princess grew feverish with waiting. When, after some months, her father finally gave her freedom of choice, she accepted her suitor, much in the spirit of a blind date, for she still did not even know what he looked like, but had a vague idea of his age. A miniature of the prince arrived, showing him to be rotund of feature, but firm-chinned and soldierly. And another 3 months passed before her father permitted her to send a portrait of herself in return. When Royal proposed to send a smaller trinket as a betrothal gift, the king sternly forbade her and would permit nothing. Her future husband was to come to England, and it was a small wonder that the nervous bride succumbed to jaundice as the time drew near. "She is 10 times yellower than she was yesterday," wrote Princess Elizabeth to the Prince of Wales. Frederick William had anticipated that some small engagement token would arrive, if only to create a good impression among his people. But the king remained enigmatic and unwelcoming. "Not a ring to show," cried the prince ruefully, extending his fingers to his ally, Lady Cathcart. "Not a ring to show." So, George III's unwillingness to yield his daughter to the hazards of a continental marriage was the logical outcome of the terror spread throughout the courts of Europe by the French Revolution and the rapid rise of Napoleon. At one time, the king even pleaded the inclement weather to cause the hereditary Prince of Württemberg to postpone his arrival, and so gained a purposeful respite of 6 months. When irretrievable, the patient bridegroom landed at Harwich in April 1797. The king intimated that nothing was ready, and he said, "Better to remain incognito." The newcomer obliged by pretending not to be there at all, and he visited friends, while the princess ignored his presence and worked herself into a frantic state of nerves. When they eventually met, after a month's delay, she was almost dead with terror, and she was tongue-tied at the sight of the corpulent middle-aged man who took her hand. The queen was obliged to speak on her behalf, says Fanny Burney. The prince said he hoped this would be the last disturbance he would ever occasion. She then tried to recover, and with an effort indeed, she succeeded in joining in the general conversation. 2 weeks later, they were married at the Chapel Royal. The bridegroom was, in fact, better looking than most people had expected. The bride was supposed to have been made her own trousseau stitch by stitch. There had been ample time for it, but her sister Augusta wrote more truthfully. It was Mamma. You know what a figure Royale made of herself with her odd manner of dressing. Mamma said, Now really, Princess Royale, this one time is the last. I cannot suffer you to make such a sight of yourself, so I really will have you dressed properly. In a nuptial habit of white satin, with a train of fur-trimmed crimson velvet, the princess went to the altar of the Chapel Royal, as indeed a final credit to her family. In a uniform silk shot with gold and silver, richly embroidered with many decorations, the plump bridegroom looked his best, but he could not outshine her. As the wedding reception drew to an end, the finery was sprinkled with tears. The bride's 5 sisters surrounded her, and they sobbed wildly. The bride, in turn, clung weeping to her father, who could not speak, while had flowed down his cheeks. Only the queen, shrewd and sensible, made sure that the princess took with her links of silk and other rich material to be made up in the fashion prevalent in her new country. The happy pair left in the king's traveling post chaise for a honeymoon at Windsor, and they were intended to embark on their journey to Württemberg 5 days later. But, characteristic of the prevailing absurdity, the frigate The frigate assigned to them was involved in the mutiny of the fleet at the Nore, and another delay ensued before a substitute ship was found. Lady Charlotte Bruce was to accompany the couple part way, and at the last moment a royal messenger rushed up the ship's gangplank, waving a letter to her. It was from the bride's younger sister, the 14-year-old Princess Amelia, whom incidentally our Queen Elizabeth's younger sister, the Princess Margaret, so closely resembles in looks. My heart is so full with parting from my dear sister, and I cannot write. Pray say everything that is kind to dear Royale. Tell her how seriously and how sincerely I love her. I think we're on just a couple more pages. We're on to the last part. Royal had married not merely to escape the bondage of Buckingham House at St. James and Windsor, not only because she found traits to admire in her husband, or thought it high time to have one, but also because she was passionately longed to have children of her own. Packed in her luggage were 2 complete layettes of baby clothes, one for a boy and one for a girl. Her eldest brother had become the father of a girl, Princess Charlotte, only the previous year. And in writing to her brother of dear little Charlotte, she confided, I look forward with great anxiety to the moment when I shall become equally blessed. Now she traveled to her goal along the roads rutted by Napoleon's armies and felt an extra savor of reality to her dream when she first met her young stepdaughter. Princess Catherine of Württemberg was just in her teens. She was a very handsome girl, and she was the image of her father, as Royal wrote home. Her elder stepson was away at school, but the younger boy was no less pleasing. She was soon calling him my little Paul, a very comical little boy. The Duke, she added, accuses me of spoiling him. It was as well that she adopted these children and took them into her heart so affectionately, for she was to be denied her fond hopes, and in the following year her own baby was stillborn. Her husband's tragic letter with this news speaks with its own pathos. Among her letters lodged in the royal archives, our dearest hopes of the summer are suddenly destroyed, and to her father the princess presently wrote and a shaky hand. I trust that I submit with resignation to the will of the Almighty. A loss of the little thing I had built such happiness on. Shortly after their marriage, Frederick William succeeded as the Duke of Württemberg on the death of his father, and his wife was thus Princess Royale, Duchess of Württemberg. Within 5 years, Napoleon elevated himself to the rank of Elector, his wife thus Electress. A strange link of marriage then occurred, for the royal's good-looking stepdaughter Catherine married none other than Napoleon's brother, Jerome. And so the eldest daughter of the King of England became unintentionally the stepmother-in-law to the brother of her country's worst enemy. In some token of the relationship, Napoleon sponsored Württemberg as a kingdom. This was at the time of the short-lived Peace of Amiens, and the new Queen of Württemberg, Princess Royale of Great Britain, could not resist writing to her mother with a touch of the style by which queens may formally address one another. My very dear mother and sister, Queen Charlotte's indignation was intense. The new queen was never to see her parents again. Her husband, however, was so affectionate, so considerate, and so endearing that he made up for such a loss. When she had first arrived in Württemberg as a bride, he had hung a portrait of her father in her room, copied from the original painting at Windsor, and other thoughtful and sympathetic gestures continued to deck her marital life. As a wildly absurd whim, she asserted on one occasion she would like a couple of kangaroos. Her husband not only ultimately provided a pair, but built a graceful little house for their shelter. During the brief peace of 1805, Princess Royal and her husband had some English visitors, and one of them, Lady Brownlow, has left her impressions of, in fact, two domesticated little dumplings, the king playing whilst at a table cut out to fit snugly around his immense middle. The queen, shapeless with a pleasant, good-humored face, her hair frizzled and powdered. Then, alas, the wars began again, and for 9 anxious years the plump queen was practically cut off from her family. It is Napoleon, in visiting her capital, who next tells us of his appreciation. Royal found herself expected to entertain him, and she evidently played all the right cards. It was, of course, very painful for me to receive him with civility, she observed in defending this meeting years later. But the least failure on my part might have deprived my husband and his kingdom. Royal indeed treated her visitor with flattering respect. When he admired some lions' embroideries, she grandly assured him that they were her own handiwork, and the emperor went away correspondingly impressed. Her tactical connivings fended off many French inroads on her people, and her Württembergers at home knew little of the hardships that so desperately oppressed Coburg farther east. Her feminine diplomacy was laid out with every delicacy still later when writing to her brother, who had since become the regent. A careful but slightly whitewashed account of the course of events in her husband's little dominion during the Napoleonic interlude. For 9 years, as she said, she had been cut off from all confidential correspondence with the best and dearest of relations. These were years when she developed her own interests. Her charities were unbounded, her model farm quite in the English style, the art of painting on porcelain. Some of her pieces are still preserved at Windsor. As time went by, she happily watched the progress of the courtship and the marriages of her stepsons. But what happiness it was, after Napoleon's defeat, to receive a special emissary from London and to be able to talk over the illness of her father and to have the first real news of all her sisters. How much it soothes my mind to be acquainted with every circumstance, sighed the rotund little queen. The Prince Regent proposed a visit to England, but now it was her husband's turn to put his foot down, taking umbrage because the invitation was addressed to the Queen of Württemberg rather than to its king. Royal pretended to be not sufficiently well to make the journey, and a cynical ambassador was amused to note her cough in a very painful and violent manner with one eye on her husband and a farcical proof of the apology. Though her husband grew irascible in his last years, she handled him lightly. You must take no notice of him, she sometimes warned her friends. He died in 1816. Henceforth, she always wore black and kept a widow's cap in her pocket, which she donned for visitors or official events. When the Prince Regent unwisely hinted that husband and wife had not always seen eye to eye, she took up her pen indignantly. Believe me, never could I have been as happy with him as I was had not our minds been more congenial. With her stepson now, the King of Württemberg, she discovered a new serenity in her role as Dowager Queen, and she found the affairs of her adopted land involved her so deeply that felt she felt no real wish to go back to England. Two of her younger brothers, Kent and Cambridge, they paid her visits instead, to be followed in 1819 and 1821 by two of her sisters. Princess Elizabeth had recently married the Prince of Hesse of Homburg and was now within 2 days' coach journey, but found her greatly changed. So much is often to be in families a long separation. The following year, Princess Augusta confessed, had I not seen the picture, I should not have recognized her. What strikes most is that from not wearing the least corset, her hips are something quite extraordinary. Even the attraction of her brother's coronation as George IV was not sufficient to draw royal home to England, and nearly 7 years later elapsed before she at last made the journey. She is now 62, and she wrote to prepare her brother beforehand, announcing in style of the day that she was an old woman whose strength does not allow her doing many things. For boarding the yacht, indeed, she requested that there may be a chair to draw me up in, with my shortness of breath. Despite these warnings, the king was determined to entertain her royally. We have this final glimpse of the visit in 1827, when the Dowager Queen drove to Royal Lodge, and as Princess Augusta note, the king was enchanted with her company. A dinner party had arranged on the banks of Virginia water, and after coffee we took a delightful row until 9 o'clock by moonlight. My sister and the dear king were as happy as it is possible to be, and no doubt the company earlier in the day had included the 8-year-old Princess Victoria, who was to become the future queen, whom Royal had looked forward to seeing. She said, I long to see Vicky, she had written, and hope she will take a fancy to me. The Princess Royale died the following year. On the previous evening, her English maid read to her, and she did most evenings. And the princess, as usual, listened attentively. Then she said, as her maid closed the book, there, my dear, you have done, and I thank you. You will never read me another. King George IV's only daughter, the Princess Charlotte, passed from the scene before he came to the throne. Born in 1796 and named after both her and the Princess Royale and her grandmother, Queen Charlotte, she died in childbirth in 1817, a year after her marriage to Prince Leopold of Coburg. He subsequently became the King of Belgium, and he has gained a more lasting renown as Queen Victoria celebrated Uncle Leopold. With the passing of the Princess Royale Charlotte, the Queen of Württemberg, in 1828, this distinction lapsed for the third time and it remained vacant for 12 years. And that is the end of that chapter. And we are going to go on to the next chapter, which is Chapter 4, The Princess Royal Empress of Germany. And this is Queen Victoria's daughter, Princess Victoria, who married and had Kaiser Wilhelm II. So this is a really good next chapter. And this is a book that I just want to say and reiterate, I'm reading this aloud so everybody can read it for free or hear it for free. It is a wonderful book, a wonderful summer read. And if you want to download it on Audible, again, the lady that narrates it has a wonderful, lovely, soft British voice, and she's just wonderful. And it's such an easy listen. And this is an easy read for the summer. So I'm going to end this and I'm going to take a break, and I am going to post the next section on Princess Victoria, the next Princess Royale. So have a nice day, and thank you for listening.